This is Caught in the Act with Tim Clarke.
Welcome back to Caught in the Act. What happens when a lawyer is forced to personally fight the law and the law wins? In 2017, the tangled case of Jack Tonta and what happened in the boot of his car first came to light. What police said had happened was that Tonta had actually been set alight during a terrifying run-in with Rebels bikie nominee Luke Normetz, senior club member Stephen Taylor and his girlfriend Jess Atkinson. An argument about drugs and money had descended into brutal violence. Tonta was apparently bundled into the back of the car, bound, bashed, badgered for cash and then waterboarded before somehow breaking free and running for his life. A judge later described what happened to Tonta as cold-blooded torture and sentenced all three to hefty prison stints. But that was far from the end of the charges. In late 2018, detectives circled back to the case, alleging that before the trial, a conspiracy had been cooked up to get Mr. Tonta to change his story so he could get Normetz and Taylor off the hook. And what was also alleged was that busy Perth lawyer Gary Rodgers had helped them do it. So began a second chapter to this convoluted case, which eventually saw Gary go on trial and then go to prison after a jury found he had been involved in that conspiracy. The state's highest court then later ruled he hadn't been involved after Gary personally pleaded for his freedom in his socks and out of a plastic bag, but not before he had spent 15 months in prison. This week, Gary Rodgers joins us to tell us in his own words what it was like to go from law officer to alleged law breaker to convicted conspirator before the Court of Appeal cleaned the slate and set him free. Welcome, Gary. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Tim. How are you?
I'm good, mate. I really appreciate you coming in because I know this is probably not easy to talk about, but let's go back to the start. Firstly, give us a brief background check on your career in the law.
So I've been involved in WA at least for, I guess now close to 20 years in criminal law, and done a number of cases over the period. Was very busy. Did murder trials, sex offender trials, all sorts of types of trials, magistrates court, district court, Supreme Court, and knew quite a few people, I guess, in the underworld, if you want to call it that, because that's where I operated. A lot of clients from the past who had records, and then I ended up where I am today.
And as Gary's just said, that career had seen him become one of the busiest lawyers around the WA Metropolitan Courts. Most days you'd find him standing up before a magistrate or a judge arguing for bail, negotiating a hearing date or pleading a client's innocence. Some days were busier than others, like the days Gary defended alleged double killer Adam McHale, who along with his father was accused of the execution murders of Frank LaRosa and his wife Kim in 2011. They were eventually found guilty and sentenced to a minimum of 37 years in prison. But most of the other days were a busy menu of clients and cases, judges and magistrates, barristers and briefs. Is that a fair summation of a week in the life of a criminal lawyer or your life as a criminal lawyer, Gary?
Yeah, that's pretty much. There's a lot of running around. You run around from one court to the other. So some days you have to go, like in the Magistrates Court, Joondalup, Midland, Fremantle, Perth, Armidale. So there's a lot of running around, just for brief appearances here and there. Then you go trial, district court, so you'd spend all day there. Supreme Court's the same. Magistrates Court trials are generally shorter, so maybe 1 day, 2 days, that sort of thing.
And you mentioned a wide range of clients. I suppose in the morning you could be meeting a young man who's never been in trouble with the law before, and in the afternoon you could be meeting someone who's maybe had a longer career in that world. I mean, you've got to be approachable, I suppose. You've got to listen to everyone, but also be aware of what people are telling you, because they might not be telling you the truth sometimes.
I don't think they ever tell you the truth. No, but seriously, you're right. There's lots of people that have no idea. The first time they go to court, it's the first time they've ever been charged with anything, and they've got no idea what's going on. And they're young kids, parents come along, and their parents are like stressing to the max because it's their kid, and my kid would never do anything, and they get involved in something. And other end of the equation, you've got people with records of like 20, 30 pages long that have been in and out of the system since they were kids, and they're now 30, 40, and have like a 20, 30 page career on their criminal record. So a fair amount. So you get the whole range. Yeah.
And the law in Perth is obviously a finite community, and the lawyers that would work in the similar field to you get to know each other pretty well, I would guess.
Yeah, certainly a very small community, I get in that sense. You'd know, like, I could put it this way, if someone asked me, do you know this person? If I said I've never heard of them, then I wouldn't think they would be a very good lawyer in Perth, if you can say that. Do you know what I mean? Because you know everyone who's regularly on the beat and who's running around. And you can, you get an opinion of them. And so sometimes you'll find people say, oh, I've got this person. And I say, well, I've never heard of them. So if I haven't heard of them, I don't know that they'd be, very useful for you, because they probably don't know the system that well. I mean, certainly a lot of, if you know how the system works, you know what you can do, know what you can get away with, you can time things and things like that.
And you get to know the magistrates and the judges as well, I guess. But maybe not on a social level, but certainly on a professional level, because you'd see them every day and vice versa.
Well, certainly, and a lot of, I would say, maybe 50% of the magistrates would have come from the same circle, would have been former defence lawyers before they got made a magistrate. So there's a number of them on the bench as it is today that I would have known from the days when they were defence lawyers. There's some, obviously, that work for the State Solicitor's Office or other places that I'd never even heard of, but a lot of them would have come from, that sort of thing. I've worked at the DPP. There's a lot of DPP lawyers that are magistrates now, ALS lawyers, legal aid lawyers, defence lawyers. There's a lot of people that you talk to every day, and then they become a magistrate, and it's kind of like changes a bit. But,
So more than likely, Gary would have been to court on Monday, June the 12th, 2017. And probably by that afternoon would have been back in his office getting ready for the next day. Across town on that day, on that afternoon, Luke Normetz was on the phone to Jack Tonter, insisting they meet up in the borough of Ashfield, wanting a chat about why he hadn't been picking up calls from Stephen Taylor. Taylor was a fully patched member of the Rebels bikie gang. Normetz was a nominee, keen to impress, and there was a history. Taylor and his girlfriend had helped a former flame leave Tonter. And Tonter, a drug dealer, had also promised the pair an 8-ball of meth for $1,100, but had then only delivered half, asked for more money, before failing to come through with the rest of the drugs. So it was time for a little chat. When Tonter got to Ashfield, Normetz was waiting, with intent. The dealer was bashed and bundled into the boot of his own car before being driven to Taylor's skip bin business in Bayswater. Once there, Tonter was hogtied with cable ties, beaten with a torch and a pole, and then had petrol poured on his legs before the order was given to light him up. That is what Normetz did before putting the flames out himself. He then put a towel on Tonter's face and poured water over it, in the same style used on captives in Guantanamo Bay. Around this point, Tonter passed out, and when he came to, still in the boot, it had gone quiet. Quiet enough for him to risk making his escape. Using a crowbar, he got out of the boot. Using the head of an axe, he managed to cut off his bindings, and then, using his remaining adrenaline, he squeezed out of a little window and ran for it. Gary, even with all the cases you would have seen over the years, the violence involved here was particularly savage, I would say.
Well, I've got to say, there's some dispute about whether he was actually set on fire, because I've seen a report that suggests he wasn't, but that wasn't used in the case. Whether it was a forensic decision by the lawyers of the people involved, not to call for the forensic report, but subsequently they did when Normex appealed. And from the reading report, you could suggest that he may not have been set on fire at all, which was... But the Court of Appeal, dismissed that appeal.
Which would suggest that Jack Tonter might be a man that you might look very closely at evidence he might give.
Absolutely, I would have thought so, because he was like, if you say like if he squeezed out of a little window, he was quite a big boy.
Yeah.
And all these things kind of, he got a crowbar, he got out, the dirt, I don't know. But anyway, that's what happened. He got out, told the police, went to the police, told the story, or some passers-by, I think, helped him and called the police for him. And he told the police his story.
Yeah. And we'll stress here that at this point in time, you had nothing to do with this case. You weren't a lawyer for any of those charged. You'd never spoken to Jack Tonter before. So when this came to court in 2017, went to trial, this was completely off your radar, apart from maybe what you might have heard around the traps or seen on the news.
That's it. I never knew any of those people before until Jack Tonter come to see me.
On the very day he squeezed through that window, Jack Tonter told police what had happened to him and who had done it, or who he said had done it. On that same day, police picked up Normex, Taylor and his girlfriend and slapped them with a shopping list of charges. And all three remained in custody for many months, awaiting their trial. While in Casuarina prison, Stephen Taylor got chummy with another prisoner called Simon Curry. They were in the same unit for 2 months. And in that time, Taylor came up with a plan and tasked Curry to carry it out when he got out. That plan was to persuade Jack Tonter to change his story, so he would suddenly unremember those that had tortured him. That persuasion was not subtle, according to Tonter. Tonter was told a debt collector might be paying his mother a visit, or his girlfriend and his child. And so, under this pressure, Jack Tonter was taken to the office of well-known solicitor Gary Rodgers. Gary, what do you remember of that first meeting?
Okay. So when this bloke turned up, I was in the middle of a trial in a district court. I'd finished come back from the court, come back to my office, and the person who worked with me said, this bloke has come to see you. And I wasn't very efficient with diaries and things like that, so I didn't have anything in my diary to say that it was who it was. And then a few minutes later he came back and sat in a little office. I had a little spare little conference room. And I said, what are you here for, mate? He said, I've come to make a statement or something. I said, I don't know anything about that. He said, well, I've got to go to court as well. So I had to go to court in a couple of days' time. So he told me about his case, about his being charged with these offences. I said, okay, but have you got a lawyer already? He said, yeah, I've got Ian Hope. I said, well, look, it's a couple of days' time. Go along with Ian Hope. If you don't like it, come and see me again or whatever. We can change law any time after that. He said, what about the statement? I said, what statement's that about? He said, I've got to make some statement. I said, all right, what do you want to say? And so he told me this yarn. I didn't know anything about the story. He told me what happened. I just wrote down a bit of paper. Ordinarily, if I did a statement for someone who's trying to get out of something, I would put in there, I'd go and get my computer, type it up. Not that I'm the best typist in the world, but, you can take time, type it up, write it formally, I, Jack Tonter, yada, yada, full name, address, want to say this, I haven't been threatened, whatever. But on this occasion, because late in the day, I didn't know what he was doing. I'll just write it down. That's it. And after the first part, I said, here you go. And he said, yeah, thanks. I said, actually, you better sign it. So he didn't even get to sign it. So that's why he signed on the side of it, because it wasn't even that formal. It was just generally just handwritten And I know my handwriting, I can't read it half the time. So, it wasn't like there was nothing to it really on that basis.
And did you get the impression, or did he tell you directly, I need to do this to get to renege on a previous statement I'd given to the police, or was it literally just walking off the street, I need to make a statement about this incident and this is what I say now happened?
It was more like, I wanted to, like, I've given a statement, I want to change my statement or whatever it is, say something. I said, okay, you can say whatever you want. Doesn't matter to me. You say what you want to say. If it's different, they'll work it out. And so I just wrote it down for him, what he wanted to say. Then he went off after that. But, like, it didn't sort of, register with me. Or I didn't even know his name, to be honest with you. I didn't think.
Did this strike you as an unusual, like, I'm sure you have unusual interactions with people a lot as a busy criminal lawyer, but this sounds pretty random, that some guy would just walk in off the street and that you'd never seen before.
No, it's not unusual that people, like, I think it was, I don't know if it was the first one or second one, because there was 2 visits he had. Mm-hmm. He may have had to make an appointment because he was on home detention. So at some point in time, he may have spoken to me. I can't remember if it was the first visit or the second visit, where we had to make an arrangement for him to come. But if he was on home detention, he'd have had to get released by his corrections officer. Okay, so that means they would have had to ring me and say, look, Mr. Tonta wants to come and see you. Can you make an appointment for him? Can you fit it in this timescale? And when does he need to leave? When does he need to come back? So at some stage I would have made an appointment for him in that sense. And that may have been more to do with his charges as opposed to the statement he wanted to make. Because I'm pretty sure, from my memory, was that when he first come there, I really couldn't even remember who he was. And I thought he'd just come to see me about his court case. And then he said, no, I'll come to make a statement. I said, whatever. And I didn't even go and get my computer, which I could have just gone down to my office, sat in my office and said, okay. So if I'd have known he was coming to make a statement, because people do sometimes do that. It's not unheard of. People would come and say, look, I've given a statement, I want to make a different statement, or I want to vary it or something like that. But I just thought he was coming to talk about his court case. And that was when we talked about him living in Hong Kong and him going back to Hong Kong, which came back in the second thingy. So that's how all the information. I'd never met the bloke before in my life. So on that day, he told me all this information that he reckons he probably didn't when he did the trial. He said, I didn't say that. How would I know it if he didn't tell me? I don't, absorb information from people mystically. He has to tell me, right? And so we had this conversation about him, about he was getting charged with burglary or armed robbery, I think it was, and that, and then he said they was going to drop the charge or something like that, and that's where we discussed about him stolen cars, getting charged with stolen car or something like that, and there's like a 371A sort of thing, which is unlawful use, sort of scenario. But that's when he told me about him coming from, like, he lived in Hong Kong at one stage. He was going to go back there, and he said, I might just go back there anyway and not turn up for court or whatever he wanted to do. But that's what people tell. That's life. That's what people like. They can do that. If there's nothing compelling them to stay, they can just take off. So that was the sort of conversation we had around that at that time. Then he just left, and I think he took a photo of the bit of paper or something like that, took it on his phone, and took it with him, and off he went.
And so, according to court documents, that statement, dated August 2018, said or stated it was only Stephen Taylor who had assaulted him. Luke Normetz was suddenly not in the frame. Later, Tonta messaged Normetz's partner, Georgia Lyle, to tell her he would be home soon. And eventually, that statement would lead to an allegation of a conspiracy between Curry, Taylor, Taylor's mum, Christine, and Gary Rodgers. Prosecutors would eventually allege that Mr. Rodgers was part of a plot to threaten, cajole, or intimidate Jack Tonta into making a false statement. Gary always denied that charge. He maintained his innocence all the way through a 4-week trial where Tonta, a long-time criminal, told a jury that at that first meeting it was the veteran solicitor who had suggested what he should say, that it was him who wrote those words down, him who got him to sign, and then advised that when it came time for the trial, that Tonta should not identify anyone. Gary, when you were sat in court listening to that evidence, what was going through your mind?
Well, I can tell you, I knew that was just a lie, a dead set lie. So that I knew what I said. I knew all along what I said and what I did. And I knew what he said and what he did. And I know that was just a dead set lie, 100%. Cast iron guaranteed. Because I know I never said nothing like that to him, because I always said to him, if you want to change your story, that's up to you. You can change your story if you want to, because if it's different or anything else, they'll work it out. The prosecutor will talk to you, the cops will talk to you. You know, you'll go to trial and all this, and they'll put it before you and say, but you said this before and all that. So I told her that works. But there's no way did I say not to identify anyone. And as far as I knew, he tried to get Luke Normetz off, no one else. That was it. And Luke Normetz was his mate, who he'd already agreed with his Luke Normetz's girlfriend that he would help out. And that was why he sent the message out, your man will be home soon, or whatever other message he sent to her. And I helped her out, and that's the sort of messages he sent to her all the time, all the way through. So I knew that when I was in there, I knew he was just lying. But it doesn't matter now, because they won't do anything about it. No one will do anything. He just lies. He lies under oath. Who cares? No one.
And having sat at the bar table probably in that very court that you were tried in, what was it like being on the other side, being in a dock, having these allegations said and pointed at you?
Well, from my perspective, honestly, I knew what I did. So in my own heart, I didn't have to worry about what everyone else said or thought. I knew what I did, and I knew what I didn't do. And I knew I didn't do what they said. So I knew all along that I didn't do what they said. But they want to run it. They have to do it. That's their case. They run it. They win. I lose. No big deal. That's the end of the day. It happens.
And again, being a regular in that court, you would have known security guards, ushers, judges. Obviously, you were represented by a lawyer yourself, but there were other lawyers representing the other co-accused in that. I mean, it must have been so bizarre that being in that environment, but that was so familiar to you. But then, being also in the spotlight and, having so much on the line.
Yeah, in some way. But like you said, I knew everyone. So I knew everyone in the court, everyone in the dock, all the people down the dungeon. I knew all of them. I knew them outside there. I knew from working there. I've seen them at the pub. I've had beers with them before in the pub. So I just knew everyone. It didn't matter to me. It's like.
But did they treat you any differently as an accused person rather than as a lawyer?
No, they didn't. They didn't treat me any differently. They treated me just like everyone else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So after 4 weeks, 4 verdicts, all guilty. The jury, satisfied the quartet had conspired to intimidate a false statement out of the victim of a serious bashing. As serious as it gets for a lawyer charged with seeking justice, not subverting it. And so, when it came to sentencing, the senior judge, whom Gary had argued in front of so many times, was not forgiving. You involved yourself in this cynical exercise with no regard for the ethics and reputation of the legal profession of which you were a member and for the courts of which you were an officer, Judge Troy Sweeney said. Our legal system may not be perfect. No legal system is, as it depends on honesty and people's willingness to take responsibility. But any decent lawyer should want it to be perfect and want it to achieve justice. Setting out to obtain a false statement and to coach a witness into further dishonesty is very far from that aim. You owed this court your honesty and integrity, and you owed it to your fellow criminal lawyers to not potentially gain clientele by becoming known, even within a small group of potential clients, as the sort of lawyer who will compromise his integrity for a client. She then sent Gary Rodgers to jail for 3 years. Gary, that moment must have been many things. Shocking, surreal and sickening were the words that came to my mind. What comes to your mind when you look back at that moment?
Oh, look, the reality was that, I knew if I was found guilty, then I'd have to go to jail. It's like, people try to argue and say, oh, look, we can argue for suspended. But I knew the system, I know it works. They would want to punish me, they'd want to make me look like a thing. And the judge said, like you said, she said something about, I wanted to get more clients or some, I knew all these, people anyway, not personally them people, but I knew people in their world all the time. They didn't have to cajole them into becoming my clients, right? I certainly didn't do that. But I guess the reality was by that time, because the sentencing was delayed, we had roughly 6 months, I think, 5 to 6 months. And so by that time I'd resigned to the fact I was going to go to jail. I sort of worked everything out, sorted everything out, that kind of thing.
How do you get your head around something like that? And for that long as well, the words sometimes used in courts is extracurricular punishment, where you're getting an extra slap just because of of circumstance. And to me, having that hanging over you for all those months, extra months, because of whatever it might have been, report delays or whatever, seems to have just an extra kick in the teeth.
Yeah, well, it's sort of I guess you in that period of time you're stuck. You can't do anything. You can't go anywhere. So you're just waiting for the outcome. Certainly it wasn't working anymore. So there's that. So there's nothing you could take your mind off it by working. So a lot of free time that you had to sort of use up and find. But I had lots of people who supported me. Well,
that's what I was just about to ask. In that. At that time, you really found out who your friends are, I suppose. Yeah,
that's true. You do, and I found I had a lot more friends than I thought I did, maybe. But, I don't know. But yeah, lots of people were concerned about me and checked up on me and things to make sure I was all right, that sort of thing. But I'd come to terms with it by that stage, and so I just planned for it, and then waited for the day. But like you say, you got 6 months. I think it's roughly 5-6 months. Where there's not much you could do but wait for that day. So you can't leave town, you can't, work, you can't do anything. And so you're sort of stuck in that time period. So then when you eventually go to jail, you've still got that period of time to go.
Yeah.
If they'd have sentenced you a lot earlier, that 5 months earlier, things could have changed. You've got 5 months ahead of time, if you get what I mean.
Yeah. So, of course, as a lawyer, Gary had walked through the gates of Casuarina prison too many times to count. But this time, he was not going to be walking out. When he first got there, prison staff wanted to put him in the protection unit, along with some of WA's most notorious prisoners, like Claremont killer Bradley Edwards, or the sniper who had murdered Rebels boss Nick Martin. But Gary, you've since said that there were inmates in there that actually wanted to have you on their unit.
Yeah, that's right, because I've got lots of clients in there. I've put them all in there, don't worry. And they were happy that I put them in there. No, they probably weren't, but so I knew lots of people in there. And so they put me into crisis care unit. And in the system, people send you, if a prisoner wants to send you a letter, they just put it in internal mail and the letters get through. So the next day, so I went there on Friday night. And on Saturday morning, they come around and they said, we've got some letters for you. And there's 5, 6, 8 letters or something from different people in different units. Come to our unit, come to our unit, come to our unit, come to our unit. And I said, all right, I'll see what like that. And then the big boss come down and said, look, we're really worried for you. We want to put you in protection. I said, what do I want to go there for? I don't need protection. I said, no, but it's, our concern. I said, no, that's fine. So he said, do you want to go into a unit now or do you just want to stay here? I said, I'll just wait here, it doesn't matter. So I just stayed in that crisis care thing and I spent probably about a week and a bit.
And what was that first 10 days like?
It was, I wouldn't recommend the crisis care unit to anyone because you just you get locked in your cell all the time. They're monitored. You can't change the TV channel, so if you want to change the TV channel, you've got to press the alarm button for them to come and use the remote, because people that, generally speaking, that are held there got mental illnesses, and they eat the batteries and things like that, so they can't give you a remote. They put the food through the slot like you see on TV, that sort of thing. In the morning, they let you out for like maybe 20 minutes because I can't remember exactly the numbers there, but because each person had to go out individually, you couldn't go out as a group. So that if there's like 10 people and they get 20 minutes each, that's 200 minutes, there's 3 hours, whatever, and then it's lunchtime, kind of, you know what I mean? So it was a bit like that. So they kept you in the cell all day. You only come out in the morning for breakfast, and in the afternoon they let you out for 10 minutes because they had so many people to get out.
Yep.
But during the night there was people, bashing and singing out and all sorts of things like that because they were mentally ill. And even like some of the people there, the officer said, look, we've got, they're here because they've got nowhere else to put them. So we've got to look after them.
Yep.
We're not trained mental health nurses or anything like that. But they're in this unit because there's nowhere else. They can't go anywhere else. We can't put them out in the street. And
again, your experience would tell you that the only secure psychiatric unit in this state, Greylands, is 28 beds, I think. Yeah. And I think I was told by a guard at the district court, actually not 2 weeks ago, that I think 24 of those beds are now permanently housing long-term psychiatric, sort of on people that have done the most horrific things, but have found not to have been mentally responsible for doing them because of their severe illness. So that leaves basically 4 beds in the whole state for exactly the people that you were then housed with for 10 or 12 days. Yeah,
10 days, I think, 10, whatever it is, yeah.
What was the food like?
There, look... Yeah, it wasn't going to win any Michelin stars, let me tell you that. There wasn't any there's no Michelin stars going on there, let me tell you. So it was pretty ordinary, but I didn't eat much anyway, because you can't do that. There's no exercise, you can't do anything like that. You just lay on a bed. It's like really, if you'd really want to imagine TV prisons, like that's what it's like. Do you know what I mean? Like they describe on TV, so you get a little thin mattress, like, 1 inch thick, one blanket, one pillow that's been used by 2,000 trillion people over a career, you know what I mean? Probably still got straw in it or something. But, and it's monitored all the time. They've got CCTV in the room, so it's monitored all the time. So they watch you all the time because there are other people, and other people like, white feces on the wall and all that sort of stuff goes on all the time. So it's a pretty harsh place.
And Gary, of course, had always maintained his innocence, believed his innocence, and still did. And so he did what every convicted man and woman in Western Australia has a right to do. He appealed, and he had little choice to run that appeal himself. Of course, he had a slight advantage, having appeared in the Court of Appeal several times before for other clients. But he also had a major disadvantage, because he was in prison with little or no computer access. It's often heard in courts around town the sometime impossibility of prisoners on remand to be able to properly view the evidence against them. So, Gary, give us an insight into how the hell you go about mounting an appeal case personally from those prison conditions.
Okay, so at the prison I was at that time, they have a library with computers in there, and you have to book them, but they don't have any forms on there. Or they didn't at the time when I got there. So you couldn't. So when you do an appeal, you've got to fill out the official forms and file the official forms. So they're structured, whatever, and you can't just make one up. All right. So I had to talk to someone there, who then had to go and talk to IT for the system to get those forms onto the computer, so I could fill out the forms.
You'd think they might just pop them on there on the desktop. That might be one of the most regularly used forms in the prison system. You would think.
Look, I think probably by the time, because I went to a prison farm, so when I went there, most people there are long past their appeal stages.
Right.
So it's probably more
that's fair enough.
of something where they don't do that because most people have gone past that. So there wasn't any there. So I asked the person. They got it. They did their best. take a few days or whatever. They got them on there, put it on, had to get security or whatever. And then you have to fill them in, then you have to print them out. And luckily these days, the Court of Appeal will take emails, because back in the day, not so long ago, they'd only take faxes.
That's right.
And
or you used to have to put the big book in the slot in the box at the Supreme Court building,
but just your basic first appeal form used to have to be faxed.
Yep.
Even like, I don't know how long, but it wouldn't have been that long ago that was still asking for fax, and had to be faxed because, we're really up to date with the times or whatever. And so I filled out the form, and then I take it to a part of the prison system where they do emails for you and do it, and they email it off for me. And then I got all the papers sent in from the lawyer I was using before from the trial. Mm-hmm. They sent me a big box of papers, so I had all the paperwork there, and I had to read through that and disseminate that and put my grounds in.
And you did this yourself, presumably because funds were quite tight?
Yeah, because I was in jail. I didn't work for 6 months before I went to jail. Then I was in jail. I was working in jail, but you get $7 a day. It's not really.
And what were you doing?
Well, I had a bit of a career actually. No, when I first got there, because when you go to the jails, you got to get a job. Well, you don't have to, but if you don't make any money. So you get a job. You don't work hard. Don't get me wrong, but I was just cleaning the tables in the dining room initially, and then I went from there to I did the breakfast dish up things. It's like put cereals in bowls for when the people come through, and then I got a job doing cooking, become a cook or whatever you want to call it, and did a certificate too in kitchen something. I don't know what it's called.
Do you think there's a Michelin star in your future?
No. No. But I did learn a lot. Actually, I did learn a lot.
And did you witness any violence while you were inside?
Oh, sort of. Not. I mean, look, it's not as much as people may believe. It's certainly. I saw like a few people get into fights, things like that. A couple of free fights, probably. One bloke got stabbed with a paintbrush or something like that in the eye. But in the eye socket area, sort of thing like that. And that, that was the extremist of it. There wasn't any no really brutality sort of things that you'd imagine that you see on TV. None of that sort of kind of thing. Not that I saw anyway. I'm not saying it may not happen, but I saw.
And were other prisoners interested in the appeal process, or in terms of how you were going about it?
Oh yeah, they're all anyone who had an opportunity wanted to do an appeal. Of course, I mean, I'm sure you'd know if you read the appeal court things. People appealing all the time. Yep. And they run, even with lawyers, they run appeals that probably would never, get up in a million years. So everyone wants to appeal.
But having an experienced solicitor, law, person that had come from a law background doing their own appeal, were they trying to get any hints and tips off you? And were you charging them by the hour?
No, listen, I can't give advice anymore. You know that, don't you? You understand what I'm saying?
I hadn't actually thought of that. Of course you can't.
No, right? So I can't give advice anymore. So I couldn't advise anyone. I may have given them a tip or a pointer or something like that.
But not formal legal advice.
No, not formal legal advice.
So, last October, in the highest court in this state, in front of some of the most senior judges in the country, Gary walked from the dock to the bar table in his socks, ready to appeal for his freedom. Well, almost ready, because he'd brought all his legal papers with him from prison, but they'd then been confiscated by security as he entered the building. When they were eventually returned, with seconds to spare, they arrived in a carrier bag. And from there, Gary Rodgers took on the state and a jury conviction. Gary, what was that day like?
So just before, I thought I was going to do it actually by video link. And then at the last minute, they told me, oh no, you've got to go into court.
Right.
So they said, oh, have you got any clothes? I said, well, only the clothes I come in, which is my worst clothes ever, because I knew where I was going. So I didn't wear my best suit, right? And so they said, oh, what are you going to do? I said, I just go like I am in my prison greens. That's fine. I don't mind. So the court had sent me a USB with all the court papers on it.
Mm-hmm.
But because in the prison system you're allowed to use USB, so they downloaded that onto CD for me. And then said, we'll loan you a laptop so you can do it by video link and use the laptop. Then the last minute said, no, you're going in. So when I got there, I had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go.
Mm-hmm.
You get to court at probably 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock and wait around until 10 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
And by that time, they took my papers from me when I got to the courthouse. I said, I need them for my thing. Oh, yeah, we'll give them back. And then, of course, they didn't. So when I get upstairs, I'm staying there, I've got no shoes on because I might strangle myself with my shoes or something. I was wearing my prison greens, and the court said, come to the bar table. So I went up to the bar table, and I said, look, Your Honour, I don't have my papers with me. I bought them, but they become a bit of a thing. And so they passed me we got them, set them back up, and then we just did the argument and went from there. I mean, I just thought, you've got to give it a crack. Do you know what I mean? That was it. That was it. I give it a crack, see what happens. If I lose, I lose. If I win, I win.
And in April this year, WA's Court of Appeal returned their judgment in Rodgers versus the State of Western Australia. They found the evidence before the jury was not capable of establishing beyond a reasonable doubt that Gary knew or was part of a plan to threaten, cajole or intimidate the drug dealer, Jack Tonter, into giving a false statement. They found there was no compelling proof that Gary had agreed to bully Tonter into giving a new statement, and so he was innocent. He was cleared and out of prison. Gary, how did you find out about that ruling, and what did it feel like when you heard it?
Okay, so what happened after I did the appeal hearing? That was, I think, October the 12th, I think, from memory. And then it was like I went back to the prison. I waited, and I hadn't heard anything for a month. I thought, maybe, I don't know how long it takes. So I rang up a friend of mine who's a lawyer and said, look, just look in the Court of Appeal cases because you can't access the internet when you're in prison. And see how long it takes them to make a decision for me, because they're just looking for 12 months, 8 months, 10 months. I said, all right, okay. At that point I'm thinking, well, if it takes that long, I'll be past my parole time, because my parole was in February the next year, so I'd already done 15 months or whatever it was. So my parole was coming up anyway. So I didn't know whether to prepare a parole plan or wait for that. So anyway, after that, about a week later, I got a letter from the registrar of the Court of Appeal, and they invited me to apply for bail. And they said, in the letter it said, look, the quorum has asked the registrar to write to you, say, apply for bail, fill out the form, there's no need to show exceptional, because ordinarily to apply for bail when you're pending an appeal, you have to show exceptional circumstances once you get bail. They said there's no need to do an affidavit explaining it, no need to show exceptional circumstances, just fill out the form, send it in, and we'll set a hearing date. So I filled out the appeal, that particular form, got the court or the prison people to email it, and I gave them the email address for the DPP, the Court of Appeal, and the Registrar of Court of Appeal, whatever. But they first way just sent it to DPP, so I didn't hear nothing, and I thought, So I went back in and I said, what did you send that email for me, mate? And he said, yeah. Where did you send it? He said, I sent it to DPP. I said, what, no one else? He said, no, because they said, we just thought they'd pass on to the Court of Appeal for us. And I said, mate, you're kidding me. The DPP hates me. They're not going to pass it on anywhere. You're joking. So, but that's what I said. And he said, I said, send all 3 addresses. I sent it all. So the next day, I got another letter back from the Court of Appeal. They said, look, we'll have the hearing on Friday. DPP, send us your terms of bail conditions, what you want for bail conditions. By the end of the close of business that day, we'll have to hear the next day. So the next day, that Friday, I think it was Friday, they had a bail hearing for me, gave me bail, and then they said, look, we think we should be able to give our decision by January, but we've got to put a date in the system for court, just so there's something in there. And they gave me a date, January the 22nd. So I got released on bail, I think it was December the 9th, something like that, roughly, around about that time, I think. And then I waited till the 22nd, and then just before that, it was, look, we need more time. So they put it off till the 22nd of February, and then...
But the point being, the Court of Appeal doesn't usually give bail to people that their appeals aren't going to be successful.
Well, that's what I thought, right? But I rang around a lot of people I know, and I said, look, they've wrote to me, they've told me this. Well, what do you reckon? And they're going, they've never heard of it. They don't do that. What do how did you get that? Because that just doesn't happen like that. It's what that's what people was telling me. It just doesn't happen like that. Because normally, like I said, you got to show exceptional circumstances, make a full argument. And here it was like I didn't have to do anything. So that was like, in one way, it was a good thing. But then when I got put on bail, then they kept delaying it. Started crossing my mind, well, maybe they're changing their mind here. Maybe they're going back on what they first thought. Because they put it off for like a couple of times. I think so February, March, and then in March is at April. And by that time I booked a ticket to America. Was hoping. So I don't know if this is... I don't know if someone knew that I had a ticket booked on the 13th, because they called... I was booked a ticket to go to America on the 13th, and they gave the decision on the 12th.
Oh, right. And
they told me before that, but I already... So, it was, and that
must have been... I mean, it must have been relief.
Oh, yeah.
Relief.
It was like,
Because not only are you out of prison, your conviction was quashed.
Yep.
So you are innocent of the you are now, as you sit here today, you are now innocent of those charges that the DPP brought against you.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing.
Yeah. But it cost you 15 months of your life inside,
Yep.
and you won't get any compensation for that, will you? No. Because that's not how it works in this state.
So it's 15 months of my life, for, I don't know, what happens, 15 months. But look, I just move on. You can't look back. You can't, you can't let it get to you. Mm-hmm. You just got to say, it happened, move on, cruise along, And
what happens now? What happens now with your right to practice?
Well, I mean, I'd have to apply, because as far as I understand, my practice certificate was cancelled, so I have to apply for it. I can't renew it. I have to get a new one. I have to actually apply for a new one. And I thought about that, but then I thought, well, I'll have a holiday instead, So
has the whole experience, how does it make you feel? Is it bitter? Do you see the flaws in the justice system that you spent 20 odd years working in?
I try not to be bitter. Sometimes sometimes you can think about it too much and let it get to you. But I try not to do that. I try to think, well, life happens. Just that's what happens, But look, all my life I've worked in that system. Well, not all my life, but since I was 26, and more than that, like just in WA 20 years, but before that elsewhere. And I've seen people get treated worse than me. I've seen people sit in jail for 2 years and then go to trial and get found not guilty and walk out. And what they say, oh, you're free to go. They don't say, oh, sorry for holding you for 2 years in jail. They don't say, well, that's bad luck. Maybe we should give you a little donation to help you. No, it's just like, oh, you're free to go. No, sorry about that. They never say sorry. Well, most of the time they don't. There may be one or two people that might. But, so I've seen people sit in jail for a long time. And you look at people like, who's that bloke, who did 12 years for that murder? What's his name?
Scott Ostick?
Yeah, Scott Ostick, people like him. So I knew him, because I worked with Clint, I knew him. So I've seen what happened to him. You do 12 years like that. And so it's not the worst. My last 15 months is nothing compared to his. Do you know what I mean? He might get compensated, I don't know, but... so there's always people worse off than me. And when I was in jail, there's people there that had been in jail for 30 years. And they were younger than me. And they'd been in jail for 30 years. And just on the cusp of getting out. In fact, one bloke I know is from there was being released recently. He'd been 33 years in jail. You can imagine what it'd be like to get out after 33 years. And, I'm not saying he was innocent, but, there's a lot worse off than me. So that's how I look at it. I try not to hold grudges. I try not to hate people or, be vindictive or anything like that. It doesn't matter.
Well, I'm not sure I would be quite that magnanimous in your position, Gary, but it's good to see you. It's great to have a chat. We always got on when you were on that side of the law, and I'm very grateful that you've come in and shared your intimate knowledge of what it's like to be on both sides. So thank you.
No problem. Anytime.
And a postscript to this tale, a tragic one. In July this year, police were called to a property in South Guildford after neighbours reported hearing a gunshot. There, they made the horrific discovery of a young mother who'd been shot in the head. 30 kilometres away, more police were converging on a property that was on fire in Innaloo. And inside that fiery flat was another body. That body was of Luke Normetz, the bikie wannabe who had bashed Jack Tonter. He had died from self-inflicted wounds. The dead woman was his ex-partner, Georgia Lyle, who had died from a gunshot wound he had inflicted on her. And he had inflicted that horror after being released from prison on parole 2 years before the end of his sentence for the torture of Tonter. The Prisoner Review Board, in their decision, had deemed Normetz an acceptable risk to the safety of the community because, according to them, he had no previous history of violence. That decision is now being reviewed by the state's Attorney General. I'm Tim Clarke. Thanks for joining us again. And remember, if you want to know what's happening in court, don't get caught short. Get caught in the act instead. We'll see you next time.